What are the key risk indicators to review in terms of cybersecurity?
So cybersecurity, if you think about it for more than 5 minutes, you'll be terrified, and you should be. I mean, just given the news these days, and it's not only emails going public, it's not only credit card and healthcare information going public. Now currently we're even talking about is, the political system and the integrity of the election is going to be infected. It is everywhere. The threats are enormous. They're not going away. From a board perspective, that is one of the major risks that every company faces. And again, to every company is a technology company. Every company needs to be aware of that as a major risk. Now, having said that, it should be part of, sort of the whole structure of enterprise risk management. It's not kind of off in a silo. It really is about, first understanding from the board level, where are our vulnerabilities? And it may be emails, it may be healthcare information, it may be all of these things. And it may also be, sort of the company trade secrets. Are those put online? Where are those put online? Is the company's secret formula on the same server as the air conditioning, that sort of, links into some other system? It shouldn't be. So really understanding what's really important from a company perspective, what needs to be protected, what's most vulnerable, what could have the biggest impact on the company, and then how are those things protected in a way that may be different from, sort of the rest of the technology that's not as critical. That's number one. Number two is understanding the culture, the people implications. When I speak to cybersecurity experts, they say the number one risk is people. And that means a few things. How many people within a company get an email and, it's something that looks interesting and you click on a link. What companies have now started to do, which I think is really interesting, is send out those emails, and when you click on the link, you get a note that says, if this was real, you would have just breached, your company's firewall. And so that kind of training to help build, what's referred to as sort of a culture of security, an awareness that people can just, with all good intentions, do things that are threatening the cybersecurity of the company. That's another thing. Relationships with third parties. So a lot of the big breaches that have been public, it hasn't been because something that's deeply protected within the company was breached. It was because there was one instance where there was an online restaurant menu that had some sort of a worm or a virus, and when people at the company went to order lunch from that menu, that was how something got into the company's servers. So just, building that awareness. And if you're on the board, you don't need to know exactly how it works, but you do need to know enough to ask the question, how are you training people and how are you protecting against those sorts of issues? Then really understanding what's happening in terms of the company's vulnerabilities and hacking. So most companies, or at least most large companies these days, will have a scorecard. And that would include things like how many times has the company been hacked. And when I say that, it's how many times have breaches been identified. Because again, cybersecurity companies say every company has been hacked. There are only two types of companies, the ones that know it and the ones that don't. And so, the scorecard is how many breaches have we identified? What's the magnitude of those breaches? Are they material or are they, sort of minor things? What are the trend lines? Is it getting worse? Is it getting better? And when we do know about those breaches, what are we doing about it? Those kinds of things, there's all kinds of, probably if you look online under cybersecurity scorecard, you could probably find any company that has either an internal or an external expert in cybersecurity will have a model for a scorecard. And those things change over time too in terms of the information that tends to be helpful. But having that and really being on top of that and understanding that is important for a board. And then the last thing is what happens when there's a breach? And what's the infrastructure that's in place? Who's going to know about it? What are you going to do about it? What's the information flow? What's the crisis management team? All of those pieces the board really needs to know about. One other thing I think that boards should be asking is, sort of how do we compare to our competitors, to sort of best practices, to you can't say, there's X standard in the industry, but there are, a lot of organizations that have sort of looked at it from a kind of a maturity perspective, where are we on that spectrum? So whatever benchmark the board and management decide is the right one, and maybe it's more than one, you want to know, because again, if you're not a cybersecurity expert, you don't know how to put it into context. To say company X has had 1,000 breaches in a month sounds scary, but it may be that all of its competitors have had 10,000, or it may be that all of its competitors have had 200. And so knowing that really helps. So putting it into context instead of is another key risk indicator that I think is absolutely critical.